Amir Khalighi is the founder of Embodied Masculine, and we sat down and had a conversation about what it means to be masculine in your whole, not the societal views on what masculine is, but how we can actually embody the entirety of the masculine and how we balance that out with the feminine, how that affects our relationships and how we interact with the women, the relationship we develop with ourselves, and ultimately how we show up to the world. Now, after we finish recording, we continue the conversation, and I actually really wish we caught that last bit on on the recording. And at the end of the podcast, I'm actually going to share what we spoke about. It was pretty wild, actually. The synchronicity was unbelievable, and it had something to do with this piece of art behind me, and also the piece of art that was behind Amir. So, at the end, I'm going to share that with you guys. I hope you really enjoy this conversation. I certainly enjoyed having it. Let's get into it. All right. Well, let's get started.
All right.
Yeah. So thanks once again for doing this. I really appreciate it. And when I was looking at your content, I really resonated with a lot of the things that you were saying, and I just felt like part of this journey for me during the podcast is to just explore these types of ideas with people where they can just hear a conversation around it, so they can be a fly on the wall and be a part of that conversation and just kind of feel into some of these ideas that I think are really lost. And I feel like so much of society need to be involved or would benefit so much from hearing these types of ideas and concepts and ways of living. So could you give like an overview of what it is that you represent in Embodied Masculine?
Sure. It's a big question, but I'll try to decipher it and unpack it somewhat succinctly. So I've been working with men since my early 20s in one form or another. And in 2018, through kind of a really powerful somatic experience it was like in a 5-day retreat where I was actually asked to come teach and also invited to participate. It was the participation aspect of that engagement that really moved something energetically through my body, somatically moved, where a clarity fell upon me on what the second half of my life's work was going to be. So in 2018, through this old Tibetan practice, it has its roots in multiple traditions, but there's a practice referred to as the God form practice. I got a sense of a version of myself that was yet to come. Like an embodied sense of the version of myself that could carry out what was in me to carry out. And touching that, experiencing that through that practice, laid the groundwork of the distance between who I was in that moment and the distance between me and that version. And what I needed to amplify in my life to be the kind of man that could carry out that vision that was in his heart. So in 2018, I had this awakening. And this is at the age of 47, I guess. I'm 52 now, so maybe 48. And so I came back. I was a professional actor at that time. I told my agent goodbye. Like on the same day I came back, said goodbye. I had another business that was kind of taking care of all the bills while I on the side worked with men, and I changed that within a year's time. By 2019, I was fully working with men, carrying out that vision that had come through in what my calling was. And my calling, in short, is to bring men to the feet of the Great Mother. And all that means for me is put men in touch with the true source of life force energy that emanates out of the earth and all of us, and to bring back that reverence for that relationship and that connection, so we don't unconsciously abuse her. And when I say abuse her, not only do I mean the earth, but I also mean our counterparts, our feminine counterparts, and how we relate to our feminine counterparts. So really a change in the paradigm of masculinity, a more balanced version of what it means to be a man. We've had various renditions in trying to find the right temperament of masculinity. In the 60s, it was this very passive Alan Alda-esque, male figure, this archetype that really didn't serve many men that have warrior energy running through them, which we naturally do from thousands of years of evolution. So in short, my work is to detach men from societal bewilderment and reconnect them to a deeper part of themselves in finding that connection within themselves. Wonderful. In birthing this new version of masculinity.
And do you think this version of masculinity that you speak of is something that we just haven't yet reached as a society, or is it something we've forgotten as a society?
I think it's the latter. And obviously with different nuances, because as a human species evolves, certain notes will follow that evolution, but there is also a forgetting that has happened. There was a time when men held feminine power with reverence. It didn't have to be subjugated. It didn't have to be controlled. It didn't have to be feared. And there was a time pre-patriarchal systems where for thousands of years in a feminine-centric society or culture, these two powers were in balance with one another. And about 3500 BCE is when the introduction of the temple laws and the disassociation of spirit from matter started to come into play, where in order to find God, one had to ascend out of the body. And there's nothing more holy than the body. It's yes, there's ascension connection, but first and foremost, we really must not abdicate our power, our inner connection to that which lives within us. And we live in a society that promotes looking outward all the time for to have our needs and fulfillment met, which is it's a bag of shit. Really, it's dangling lights. It's siphoning off energy, in order for others to kind of create their reality. So the work I do is really about empowerment within, like, men getting in touch with the depths of who they are and living out their life, a life that most likely they set out to live on some level at some time. We'll call that the soul's calling.
Yeah, and what do you think the reason is that as a society we've come so far away from that? Because it feels to me, as I've moved along my journey, and what you speak of going within, I find now I've really built a strong relationship with this inner guidance system, where I will actually ask a question out loud and I'll just sit in the stillness, not in thought, and I feel things arise within me that just feel so clear and to be the right thing for me, versus previously I'd always be looking for this person to tell me this or this person to tell me that. And before I was looking for answers, I was just kind of following the things that the trappings that I think we can so easily fall into, that most of society, I feel like, have fell into. And the whole time when I was in that space of trying to chase or looking outward for those dangling lights, it's like somewhere in me there was a whisper which just knew it wasn't right. But you assume it kind of is right because everybody else is doing it. So that must be the path. That must be the path to, where I want to get, which is to feel like I'm worthy or that I'm meant to be here. What do you think has got us to this point to be so misguided and so far from the mark?
Well, anytime somebody tells you that you need them or their system to reach a state of spiritual evolution, then you're being taken. Then a part of you is being taken or used. And look, there a lot of good has come. Some good has come from religion. Oh, let's say a lot of good has come from religion, and a lot of pain and destruction and death and disconnecting men and women from their innate natural connection to the natural world has come from religion. So, and it's not just religion. We can talk about corporations, and we can talk about any large entity that wants to numb you down in order to hijack your attention for its own self-gain. And really what's happening is you are abdicating your attention that should be residing deep within the roots of your body. And we as a society have kind of lost touch with these lower chakras, these lower parts of our bodies that are earthbound. We are, because of the technology and we'll call it technological advancements in the society that we live in, our attention and energy rises up to here. So a lot of people live in their minds. So a lot of the work that I do with men is reconnecting them with these lower chakras, reconnecting them with the natural world, reconnecting them with what it feels like to rub their fucking hands in the dirt and put their feet in the mud and to breathe in the rain, and to become more familiar with reawakening their senses to a more natural state. Because I truly believe there's divinity in the expression of life manifest, whether that is through the flowers that we get to see, or the trees that bear fruit, or the radiance of life that runs through all of us. There is a intrinsic connection to that power. And when you stop relating or tuning into that power, you give yourself permission to actually become more abusive in your search for fulfillment. That's why you see so many, men giving themselves permission to take advantage of, feminine counterparts or female partners. There's a disconnect from a deep sense of self that gives one permission to act in such a way. Because if you were really tuned into that, you wouldn't be able to do ill to an extension of you. It would be insane. So I really think it has to do with a retethering back to the earth, the natural world, learning how to relate and move with it. And don't get me wrong, the natural world, is what it is. It is an intense, beautiful, powerful, vicious, creative, destructive mechanism of life, death, and regeneration. Includes predators and prey, and but I got news for everybody. Like, we're all going to go through that process, no matter how much money you got, no matter how much you chase your lights and flashy, signs. At the end of the day, we go through that process. We go through that death, destruction, rebirth process, and we go through that as humans throughout our lives and the stages of life that we die to and are born again to. But we also will eventually physically come to a conclusion of this version before our consciousness manifests in some other form.
Yeah, and you mentioned about not being able to mistreat our counterpart or the extension. Do you think that comes from so many people now are so like you said about reconnecting to themselves? Do you think poor relationships with others are really kind of born out of having a poor relationship with ourselves?
I would say, we live in a society that doesn't foster feminine expression unless it is packaged and delivered in a certain way. So when you have a boy that's 7 or 8 years old and he's expressing himself like freely, and he or 10 years old, whatever that age is, where kids are mean to each other, and he gets chastised for that expression. The message that society's sending him is that there's something wrong with him, and this is something that is naturally being expressed through his body. So he immediately disconnects from his own feminine. He immediately disconnects from his own feminine because it's not safe to express that part of the feminine. And that part of him then becomes dormant, and it also gives him permission on a certain level to not be able to relate to his counterpart feminine in life. Because if you're cut off from your own feminine, you're not going to truly be able to hold the essence of your woman.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of the work that I do in my containers is kind of reintroducing men to parts of themselves that they have shut down for a good reason until it's not a safe space to let that expression start to live through them. And what they experience is, because of this wholeness, like a vitality falls upon their lives. There's a deeper sense of wholeness, being able to become familiar with the depths of your masculine and feminine range within your body, and what that even means to you, and becoming more and more sensitive to what's going on internally.
Because I suppose that in and of itself, to become sensitive to what is going on internally, is to feel. And I suppose that is igniting the feminine within, right? To be able to actually feel into what is going on and moving out of the kind of the masculine logic and just the thinking.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is more a sense of being and feeling, right, than doing and thinking. So that's, it's a playground. Like every Wednesday night, I get men from all over the world that come into this container where we explore these realms. We dive into crevices of expressing that warrior that's dripping with blood and sweat and that energy. And then we'll shift over to, what it feels like to be with a grandmother's touch, or what does it mean to be receptive, and, what are the physical states of, adjustment to work on receptivity. What is receptivity? What is, because ultimately, the biggest complaint from the feminine is, I can't feel it. I can't feel him. I don't know what's going on, or his presence is not there, so developing the capacity to hold attention where we want it. Now, these are all the trainings that we kind of fall into at the end of the day, to make us, you're right, more sensitive, and less dependent on external external quote unquote needs, but to really move more and more deeper within for answers, for really that divine connection ultimately.
Do you, it appears to me, Amir, and I wonder what you think on this. It feels like society has not only killed the feminine from within men, it really feels like it's been kind of removed from a lot of women also.
Yeah. Well, that was the whole premise on, you know, in the name of equality, just be more like a man. You know, and the feminist movement kicked itself, you know, when it tried to being equal to men doesn't mean being like men. Being equal to men has to do more with how men hold the feminine, how we hold the feminine in our presence,
Yeah.
right? Allowing them to be their truest expression. Like I had a workshop just recently, you know, with a certain number of men and a certain number of women, day-long workshop. And we had a practice where the men, you know, I got them in a circle and I really worked and helped them to feel grounded, make the breath move through their body, kind of connect to each other in the circle, really create a sense of safety in that container, right? Really make themselves available to what was about to happen. What happened is we invited the female practitioners to then move into the inner circle, and the female practitioners were working with rage, were working with the expression of rage, because as much as, like, you know, women have also been stifled in the expression of their pure feminine energy, because men are like, oh, she's too much, or they're always constantly trying to modulate her, control her. So in this practice, we really invited them to tap into either their personal rage, their karmic rage, their just maybe rage that's in the collect, whatever's running through. That's the beauty of the feminine. The feminine has this incredible capacity to be able to feel the pain of the world, because she's so intrinsically part of it, right? And she is the chosen vessel for, like, the portal of creation, you know, so she's incredibly tuned in. So we gave her this space, and you had, you know, these 12 women that were riding with what needed to move, and these men simply held that. They didn't need it to end. They didn't need it to come to a conclusion. Their nervous systems may have been pushed, but we work on building the capacity to be with larger and larger amounts of energy, holding that feminine. And of course, from rage, it transmuted into eros. And of course, men don't have a problem when it's eros, right? They don't have a problem when that same pain starts to move through sensuality, right? But hey, man, you want this, you got to be able to hold the other side of it, you know. And it's about learning how to be with that energy without needing to control it, which I think is a big part of men's work.
Yeah,
Personally.
absolutely. And I mean, how do you think this imbalance, I mean, it to me feels like, especially when we see movements like the manosphere and the red pill kind of movements, and I see a lot of men that really appear to have quite a lot of disdain for women, and also the other way around. And there seems to, and I don't know if I just notice it now more, but it seems like there's more of a divide that
Mhm.
really does need healing between masculine feminine energy, but also between men and women and in relationships. And one thing I've always, or I've never taken part in, is if I've been around guys that start to talk shit about women,
Mhm.
I'm always like, like I was saying this on, I did a podcast with Justin Lovato, and I was saying that 50% of all of our ancestors through all of time that had to go through absolutely everything for us to be here were women. So as men, how are we going to hate on women when 50% of all of our ancestors were women.
Yeah. Look, and I don't get me wrong, right? There's unconscious women as there are unconscious men. But we are talking about a ecosystem, a societal ecosystem that has put men in a position of power for, close to 7,000 years. So that has to be taken into consideration when we start talking about toxicity. So yes, of course, there are women that are unconscious, or maybe they're lying, or they're manipulative. Like, we're not getting into the weeds. We're talking about large picture um, kind of principles in guiding us towards wholeness and balance. And I'm a big proponent of the Me Too movement. My wife actually went through that publicly. I was by her side, and I know the value of that power. And I also know, I know men that are like scared of that, like, oh, I'm going to get canceled because I hit on so and so 6 months ago, and it didn't go well, or I mean, and all I say to all of that is, when you live in alignment with your counterpart, you can stand and fire any feminine storm, because you're going to come to learn that you actually are not going to be consumed by that energy. It may feel like it is. That's why men throughout history have tried to control nature and have failed miserably, right? You can't control nature. You can't control women, and you should just stop. It's never going to work. The grass will always grow through the cement. Okay. So we are talking about overarching principles of bringing, balance between these two poles. And I think that starts individually, and I believe it has to be led by men. I don't think it's a woman's, I mean, yes, she's going to fight for her equality because she's the one that's being suppressed. I mean, look at right now in my country, in Iran, there's a revolution happening fueled by teenage girls. There's nothing more powerful than that potency of that energy. We can see it in the face of, murderous, draconian, backwards thinking, self-serving figures that history will forget. So it starts within.
Yeah. And what type of, with the men that you work with, and obviously you've done it for such a long time, how do you see it impact their intimate relationships?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would really love if if you could hear directly from them, but I've seen some beautiful, beautiful reconciliations. I've seen men really be able to step into a version of themselves that really creates a sense of safety for their feminine counterparts. And don't get me wrong, like, we don't always have to create this, this pole of men holding space, women expressing themselves, because it can ebb and flow. And that's why we work with both modalities in my container, masculine and feminine embodiment practices. But I think first and foremost, what starts happening that serves the relationship is that men stop making the women in their lives that one thing. They don't make her like their God. They don't make her their purpose, because I don't think any woman wants to have that much pressure on them. Right? So I think men become free to choose to be with a woman instead of needing to be with a woman, and that really invigorates the relationship. And a lot of the work that we do is to create that non-attachment. to our partners.
And how do we get there? Because I think that's probably a really difficult idea
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people that haven't come across concepts like
Mm-hmm.
this, to have non-attachment with our intimate partner. How do we kind of go about moving towards that?
Through practice. Through practice. So if you sit 20 minutes a day, twice a day, you practice transcendental meditation, we'll say, where you take your attention off of a thought and bring it back to a sound or a breath. And you do that twice a day for 6 months to a year. No matter what your thoughts about attachment you may have, your body sense of how to not attach is so trained that you will ultimately have more presence and less need for an outside sense of well-being, right? So it's like you're letting the world spin, but like without your like having to constantly be involved in it. So it's not a concept, it's a lived experience, right? It's a lived experience, moment to moment. I like to believe that, my wife, I have a big life. I have 4 kids, I have, 4 daughters. We have 3 kids in the house now, full life. And I like to believe that my wife has the freedom to leave if she ever wanted to. Not that I want her to, not that I wouldn't be crushed, but her freedom is one of my top priorities, for her to have a sense of freedom, because I want her to choose to be in this relationship. I want to choose to be in this relationship every day. And it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
So I think that's ideal for me. I don't want to trap anybody. I don't want to take any hostages. I don't want to be in a trauma bonded relationship.
It feels like a lot of people have relationship and ownership maybe confused.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people with the partners, it's like even in the terminology, my this, my, you're mine, and it's like, well, what does that mean
Yeah.
exactly?
Yeah. Look, I'm all about claiming something, like claiming your clarity around your feelings and not playing games. But yeah, man, that's very draconian, like, yeah, like possession, very like, yeah, it's not a paradigm I subscribe.
Yeah, yeah. Amir, there's an idea that I was sitting with earlier surrounding love, and not eros, but love in the sense of the perception of I see you in your entirety. And not only do I see you, I accept you and I honor you and I cherish you, and not just man to woman, as anybody. And
Mhm.
I feel as though, as men, and I wonder if this might be the reason we kind of maybe create so much attachment.
Mhm.
I noticed that of recent, I've really been stepping into this position of wanting to just love.
Mhm.
Look, I meet you. I want to see you and perceive you fully, and
Yeah.
know who you are. I don't want to reduce you to words. I want to
Yeah.
experience you. I want to accept you. And that to me, it really is a way of being loving. And
Mhm.
I feel like
Mhm.
we're kind of taught that we're meant to hold love back for a very select few people
Mhm.
and not
Mhm.
offer love out freely and not
Mhm.
recognize that we are love. And
Mhm.
I had this was a thought today. So one of the things that I've overcome in my past, which was really kind of leaning into like hyper masculinity, I suppose, and the idea of what masculine is. I definitely had uh, an addiction to sexual partners and the
Mhm.
throughout my 20s.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's a trap that a lot of men can fall into because it's celebrated by our society. It's kind of championed if a man can have a lot of female partners, and I certainly fell into that trap. And I was really sitting with the idea today that I had so many sexual partners, but never allowed love really to be a part of it. And now I find myself in a position where I want to love as many people as I can, but actually reserve my eros and my sexual desire and connection for one woman to really experience the divine through her. But I want, and it's like I had it the other way around before.
Really, really beautiful. Yeah. Well, look, we're in a culture that you can see what it promotes and what it celebrates. There's also there's no real community of elders to, we don't have a village where there's elders where the youngin can look and walk amongst and self-regulate based off of what they're getting energetically, the way to move in the world. And so there's no initiation of men. So this red energy that runs through them, they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It's red fiery energy that runs through teens and through the 20s needs to go somewhere. And as a man matures in his 30s or whenever he matures, this is a concept kind of introduced by Robert Bly in his Iron John book. As he matures, he starts to move into the stage of white energy. And in this white energy, he means well. He wants to do right, but he's not aware of the shadows that are running him. He's not clear on that yet. And then the ultimate stage is the black, where he turns and faces the shadows, not only faces the shadows, but starts to eat the shadow or integrates the shadow. And when he is able to do that, then he is kind of initiated out of that boy stage, right? And is now on a path of wholeness. And if we're to use the archetypes, he's moving towards the mature, king. And of course, we all know that also there's another book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover with Gillette and where they'll talk about, unexpressed energies will go into shadow states, what those look like.
Yeah.
So I think part of the journey of, part of each man's spiritual journey is this path from the head to the heart, where he lets go of attachments and tunes into that part of himself that he can rely on beyond the things outside of himself he believes he needs, whether that's dominating women or Corvettes or money or cars or bullshit they're not going to be able to carry with them across to the other side.
Yeah. It's recently the shadow integration is something it's actually been a big focus of my life for the last few months. And I realize how much of myself I had fragmented. And for example, one of those things, growing up as a child, I was very loving, very affectionate, very caring and emotional. And of course, like you said, a lot of boys were taught we can't be that, not to be that. And I can sense how that was suppressed. And I really recognize one of my gifts I believe I actually have to the world is the amount of love that I have to give. I really do I can feel it. There is so much in me that I want, so much love that I want to give. But for such a long time, I didn't feel like it was okay to allow that to be at the forefront of who I was. And throughout my 20s, I mean, I did the bodybuilding. I was maybe 220 pounds with abs, and I had the supercar, and I was doing all the women, and almost, just that hyper masculine, no emotion. And at the time, I didn't realize. I mean, I knew I was constantly, why isn't this? Why don't I feel okay? Why is it? I thought I'd be there now. Is this not it? Is this not it? And all the lights, constantly looking around. And whilst going through this journey of really discovering myself deeply, and this is why I call it the Lost and Found podcast, because I was completely lost. And on this journey of really finding my truer self, one of the things that I noticed was just how much I felt like I wasn't allowed to express my love, and how much I wasn't allowed to let that out because it wasn't okay.
Yeah. That's what we do every Wednesday. There's those are the, like yesterday I had the men. I use a few different modalities and taking men into the crevices of the self, to the unconscious. But usually they're in deep states of close to theta states, through breath work and guided meditations. And yesterday was just all about tuning into the type of love and touch that they need in that moment, and having the wherewithal of knowing what that is and being able to give that to themselves in that practice. It's a very intimate thing. I got like 40 guys that are just like, maybe loving on their jaws because they know there's this tension here and they need this. Like, how often do we actually tune into our bodies? We take our bodies for granted, like it's always going to be there. And how often are we like listening to our bodies? Like, how often are we truly listening to our bodies and what our needs are? And our needs could be, we're multidimensional beings. So your need could be something like today, your need could be the 10-year-old in you needs to be held for 2 minutes. I mean, can you tune into that? And can then you find a way to give that to yourself? So these are the subtleties that we begin to kind of work into the crevices of expression, love, deepening our capacity for receptivity. Right?
How important do you think it is for men to have almost a brotherhood of other men that are on this journey?
Men need men, period. Period. 3 words. Men need men, period. That's it. It's an absolute must to have a community of men where you can go to and feel safe that you can express yourself, obviously in the right format. And when it's time to simply be held, be held. When it's time to receive reflection or sharp feedback, or men that know and can call you out when you're fooling yourself. Right? Be like, man, I haven't been feeling you lately. What's going on? That doesn't happen when you're by yourself playing video games or whatever guys do.
Yeah. And it seems as though there's a lot of almost shame surrounding men of recent. So it's not okay to be a man in ways, and that's we spoke on the patriarchy, and then I think sometimes all men get lumped into that as though it's like a collective thing. Well, it's every man's fault because you're a man and you're part of the problem. It appears as though that's part of the narrative that's coming up, and it seems though a lot of men are really kind of confused on how to approach being a man.
Well, I think the principles, the guiding posts are to really feel, what is stifling you, like coming, finding ways to really get right with oneself. whatever that means. And that could take a while, but a community of other men in practice, brotherhood, and circles is moving in the direction of that, of being with that inquiry, because almost every man that comes into our community comes in because something's off. Something is off. Either relationships falling apart, or they're going through a divorce, or there's a change happening, or someone has passed. There's a turbulent awakening. There's like this rattling to realign. And we celebrate all the natural energies that run through the masculine in my space. And hopefully, wherever you go to find community, those, that's celebrated, right? As much as the lover is celebrated in our community, so is the fucking warrior. Like, we love playing with warrior dark energy, like just painting each other's faces black, getting around a fire, getting into the mud, and just letting it start to live through us. That's in our DNA. Like 100 years of like metaverse is not going to change 100,000 years of like fire and power and elements and primal connection.
It's such a good point. I can feel that there is a fucking savage in me. And as much as I am loving and gentle and caring, but I'm aware that is there. And for a long time, I've had to, I didn't know how to necessarily handle that. Even when I was younger, just very naturally, I could just reach like fire. It wasn't until I got into martial arts, and I mean, that was a lifelong. I ended up owning a martial arts school. I had that for 10 years. That was like an outlet for me where I could be that warrior. And I was actually, I mean, whilst I was still at school, I trained 13 times a week. And that was an outlet where it was almost like, oh, it's okay. And whilst I was doing kickboxing, I also did traditional karate, and when we would shout, and it just felt like, oh yeah, this is what I'm meant to be doing.
How full do you feel when that energy runs through the body? How completely full do you feel? And any energy that is suppressed will need to be expressed, but it will end up being expressed through a shadow. So why not? So in my community, when we fall into like, if we're working with the element of fire, chances are the warrior piece is going to come out. That is welcomed. We actually want more. We want it bigger. We want you to take up more fucking space. We want you to really like fucking get him out. We need him expressed. We need him like taking up space and fucking holding his ground. Like, we work out the part of you that comes out, that will come out if something irreplaceable is at stake. And you are fooling yourself if you don't believe as a man that runs through you. So, good. Let's give it expression in a safe container. Let's give it expression. That's exactly what you're doing in martial arts. I'm such a proponent of martial arts. It's part of my history as well. So I got to exercise and you move a lot of that energy and work with it for 20 plus years. And that really served me. Really served. But because men are trepidatious in relation to power these days, because power is inadvertently intertwined with destruction and suppression, right? So men, it's in the collective consciousness of men and women. So men are sheepish about stepping into power. So, it takes something for me to get it out of them when they're new in our space.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like that. It does seem like that there's almost, like you said, some trepidation, almost afraid too. Is it okay? Am I allowed? I was told I was a naughty boy for expressing myself in that way.
Right. So that's the inner work. That's the work of each man.
Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing more attractive to, a woman where a man's primal power is running through him, but right through the heart channel. Because when it's not connected to the heart, it becomes self-serving. That's not what we're creating. But you better believe the predator runs through me. You better believe, like, if somebody was to come into my space and like want to like do harm to my family, you're not going to get the lover. You're not going to get the magician. You're going to get the bloodthirsty warrior.
Yeah.
Like, so anyway, this runs through us. Sorry, everybody. It's here. It's thousands of years of our interaction with the natural world. And it's part of our DNA. So for us to pretend it's not there, now, once we acknowledge that it's there, we can run it through the heart space. We can put it in service to something greater than yourself. Because once you start living for something greater than yourself, then that's when you start moving towards the king energy. The king energy has 1 foot on the earth, 1 foot in the heavens. All the other archetypes are online. The magician, the lover, and the warrior, they're fully expressed in the masculine. And I'm not really sure if you know much about the archetypes and what they represent, but like the warrior energy is the part of you that gets shit done, that goes to the gym when you don't want to go to the gym, the disciplined one, the one that takes care, that knows the boundaries of the kingdom and makes sure that the walls are secure, right? That's the warrior. The lover is the part of you that is interconnected to all beings. It's the artist, it is the lover, it is the painter, it is the actor, it is the movement, it is the dance, it is the interconnectedness of all beings. And then you have your magician on 2 different levels. On the physical realm, he's the one who logistically knows the landscape of what you're here to create. He's your advisor. On the inner realm, he is literally the magician, the alchemist that heals himself and knows how to give advice to the king. When these 3 are online, serving something greater than themselves, now you're coming into purpose. These energies are being fully expressed. That's when you get people in position of leadership. You can see in their kingdom whether they're a king that is running a kingdom out of fear, which you can see in my country, right? So the king's shadow energy is the tyrant.
Yeah.
Right? He's either the tyrant or he's the weakling. And the weakling, you see these men, they're in marriages where they haven't spoken their truth in years. They're just quiet. They're fading in the background. It's the weakling, right? Or on the other end of the pole, he is the tyrant. You will fucking do what I tell you you're gonna do because I'm the king and I'll execute you. What do you think about that?
That's interesting, isn't it? Because it is 2 sides of the same coin. People could think they're nowhere alike, but actually, that is the same coin, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. And the way you know a king is really the true king is that life seems to be blossoming around him. The kingdom, there's order in the kingdom. There's a regenerative power that runs through the kingdom, right? Then you know the kingdom is healthy. The kingdom could be your family. The kingdom could be your men's group. The kingdom could be the organization that you run, wherever you're called to. What does life want to move through you? Where are you being tasked to step up? Something in you wanted to create this podcast. And chances are, from this exchange, it's bigger than you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and various parts of you at different times are going to have to step up on this journey. You may need to make a reach out to somebody you want as a podcast guest, and that's hard to do, but the warrior says we're doing. So it needs to get done. And you do it. right? The lover comes through in the way you interview, right? The magician does the homework, like knows who he's talking to. Everybody's online. Everybody's working for a greater cause than your self-serving needs, right? Which is what gets broken away from a child when he's initiated at 13. When a boy is initiated and taken from his mother's bed, and he wakes up to the reality that he's on his own and he has to face certain things that are hard in life, and then he survives that and comes through and is welcomed by a larger community of men, he's introduced to what? A power greater than himself. The community is bigger than him. These are the creeds we live by. So now he's in alignment and living his life for something greater than himself, which I think is something that is missing in today's society, especially this generation. They're completely oblivious. And bless them, but between like they are not being given, they're not being set up for success. These phones are numbing them. They're cutting them off. They're pulling their attention. They're shortening their attention spans. I love many things about technology, but there is a real danger in losing our humanity.
Yeah, I feel that. I actually had a lot of resistance on coming back onto social media because I'd been off it for 2 years. But I was aware that for me to do this, I had to, I couldn't see another way apart from being on social media to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And that was something that I kind of had to figure out. How do I have a healthy relationship with this? Because I went from addiction to let's cut it off altogether, cold turkey.
Yes.
Okay, well, now how do I balance it out where I can use it and not be used by it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting tool. I have mixed feelings about it too. Maybe it's a generational thing. It's possible. I see many younger coaches, their early 20s, that just live on Instagram. They just, everything is processed on Instagram. Everything is a post. I'm like, some things should be kept sacred. Some things shouldn't be talked about on Instagram. Some things should be held as sacred. Not every realization should be a post. I mean, you're basically whoring your insights into clicks and likes. It's like, there's more value, than getting 1,000 likes. There's other value that can come from, some wisdom, we'll say.
Yeah.
It's here though, we have to learn to dance with it.
We do. And I mean, I feel like you've given I think we've naturally kind of flowed through a really good overview of what it is for a man to be more integrated as a whole rather than as a fragment. And do you feel like ultimately that's what embodied masculine is about, is stepping into the wholeness to experience everything, not to fragment off, but to be entire?
Yeah, it's part of it, because once you hit that's when the realization drops of the innate connection and relationship that lives within you, that is intrinsically interwoven with the divine. Until we reclaim ourselves, we can't quite fully have that relationship. Can't serve two gods, right? So I think, the old religions had a few things, right? Can't serve two gods. So I'm a big fan of the body. I'm a fan of animism. I'm a big fan of Gaia, and the wisdom and the divinity that runs through this beautiful living speck of light in this massive black cosmos. So I think it's something really special and unique, and it should be revered. Our relationship to the natural world, it needs to come back into balance.
Yeah. And for any men that are watching this that might be curious about this type of journey, but maybe haven't really embarked onto it yet, what might your advice be to them to taking the first steps?
Well, it's like, it's coming to terms with like something that's not working and speaking the truth to that thing that's not working first. And, you know, getting honest about what's not working, and then finding a group of men that you can relate to, but that they have an essence about them that you want to bring into your own life. Maybe it's the way they talk to their children. Maybe it's the way they hold themselves when they're listening to somebody else talk. Maybe it's a sense of self that attracts you to them, but let it be something they have. And therein lies the beginning of your journey of working through all the deprogramming, decoupling, detaching, grieving, letting go, surrendering, a process that is required for ultimate free fall into this depth of ourselves that is really a endless free fall in getting to know who we are internally. So be patient, surround yourself with loving, kind men that lift you up and don't tear you down. There's enough of that goes on. Don't get together with men who don't want anything from you but to see you succeed, because they have enough for themselves that they just want to support you. I think finding the right community of support to go through life and to have life reflected back is a helpful tool for men.
Yeah. And do you think from what you said there about surrender and letting go and falling, do you feel like it's maybe more of a unlearning that we have to do than a learning?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of more like a deprogramming. It's more like a
Mm.
detoxing. It's almost like a detoxing.
A returning to something that we almost feel like we know there's something missing. It's almost like a returning home.
Yeah, it's returning home to reconnect to the beauty of a stream,
Mm.
to be stopped in your tracks again. Maybe you did stop in your tracks when you were a kid and you looked out and you saw this beautiful lake and the sun hitting it. And for a moment, you felt deep reverence as a child. And that awe and wonder is an intrinsic reflection of our connection to the divine. And a detoxing of sorts from society has to happen. That's why, most spiritual teachers, they would teach, crowds would gather, and they'd be like, I'll be back. And they would go into the forest and they would hang out in the forest for like 4 or 5 hours, really, like just kind of getting themselves back into themselves. And then they would go and they would teach again. So I think a reunion with the natural world is going to be a part of that process.
Wonderful. And maybe one of the last ones for our feminine counterparts that may be watching this, what would your advice be to them if they feel like there's something that isn't right and they are also longing for more? They feel that there's something that isn't quite there. What would be the advice for them?
Well, here's the good news. Women's circles are thriving and growing, and communities are popping up everywhere. I would recommend that they would find a community of women, a female teacher that can support their journey. My wife runs her own community, Way of the Elements, is her community. So wayoftheelements.com for any female practitioners that are looking for community and practice. And there's my community and many others for men to find what's home, what resonates as home for them.
Wonderful. And for anyone who is watching this that resonates with you and your energy and your message, where can people find you?
Thank you. So embodiedmasculine.com would be a good starting point, embodiedmasculine.com. You can see all our offerings there, and lineage of the teachers that I work with, that I have worked with in the past, and also Instagram. I am on Instagram at Khalighi, Khalhh.
Wonderful. Amir, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for what you're doing for men and for consciousness, and allowing a space for people to really kind of return to what we might be yearning for. I think it's so important, and yeah, it was an honor to have a conversation.
It's been my pleasure, Sabri. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you, brother. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed that conversation, and I want to share with you what came up after we actually finished recording. So Amir mentioned at the very beginning about the awakening that he had in 2018. And after the call, he asked me what this piece of art represented to me. And there was a few things that came up. I know, like, the shapes are kind of relevant towards masculine and feminine. And the actually what this represents to me is all the chakras being aligned from the base, the root, the red, all the way up the rainbow channel. And when we kind of clear these and they're all functioning correctly, we get that channel to the divine, to God, the creator, whatever you would like to call it, the universe. And that's kind of what it represents to me. Now, it might have a different meaning, but that's what I think when I see this. That is the channel leading up to the divine and that kind of Christ consciousness, as you might call it. And Amir said that in his awakening in 2018, he was shown a vision, and it was this. Now, as he said that to me, my eyes actually welled up, because the image that was behind him was shown to me in my most recent ayahuasca journey 2.5 weeks ago. And as he's saying that, this was shown to him in his awakening. And the stag, and very specifically, it was a stag with white and then green around it on the outside. As he was saying that, I was like, whoa, what is going on? And there were some wild synchronicities. I've mentioned my martial arts after he told me he was a lifelong martial artist. Interestingly enough, his name is also my brother's name. And a few other things where it was like, of course, like, there are no coincidences. And even down to the fact that the clothes I'm wearing are the green, and I'm actually wearing white lounge pants, which with the colors behind. And I was actually told that the stag was my spirit animal, and there was also some crossover there between us both. So it was just kind of wild. I want to thank Amir so much for doing the podcast with me. It does mean a lot, especially just getting started out. And the same with Zach and Justin for the first two. I've already got multiple guests lined up to come, and some really exciting ones. So yeah, it's just wonderful to be pursuing something that I actually believe is my purpose and my path and my reason for being here, to have these conversations, to share ideas where some people will resonate and it can be adopted or taken in and added to their way of thinking, their life, however they might use it. I just really feel that to be part of my path. And it means a lot to have the support from these people as I'm first starting out, because it'd be very difficult to do if people didn't believe in me. So yeah, it's wonderful. And thank you so much for watching as well. And again, I said this on the first one, but if you're thinking about pursuing anything, if your soul feels called towards something, but you're holding yourself back because you're afraid of trying, you're afraid of, you have that fear of failure, or there's something in you that is resisting it, just try, give it a go, and let's see what starts to happen. For me, it's kind of wild what's starting to unfold with the people I'm getting in contact with, the people that are open and receptive to doing the podcast with me, even though I'm just starting and I don't really have an audience to offer them any benefit. Ultimately, they're just doing it out of love and support. And it's really beautiful to see that when you align with a path and a purpose, I do believe that the right things unfold, the right things will happen. And I think that's when the magic really starts to happen as well. So if you're thinking about anything, go ahead, get it done. I'm going to put some links below for you to find where you can find Amir, his Instagram and his website. And if you guys are interested in connecting with me, we have the Conscious Community. So it's the Lost and Found Conscious Community. It's a free Facebook group where you can come and join. And it's a space for men and women alike. If you're a man and you're interested in Amir and his work, the links will be down below to find him as well. But yeah, that is it for this time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.